everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Raisa, and I will be one of your hosts for today's Your Mind Matters. What a great opportunity this is for us to connect and showcase the great work of the Youth Services Bureau, or YSB for short. I'm a proud member of the YSB's Foundation Youth Cabinet. The foundation is the team that fundraises to support YSB's work, and the Youth Cabinet is a group of Ottawa area high school students who come together to support other youth in our community. I have been a member for the past year and found being involved in this group has been extremely rewarding. It has given me the opportunity to take my passion for change to the next level. Today's session is an example of how being involved in the youth cabinet has provided me the platform to work on a cause which is so important to me and my peers and make real meaningful change. If you are a high school student or have a high school student in your home who is looking for a way to get involved in their community, check us out. We are recruiting for September. I have been involved this year, and trust me, it has been wonderful. Check out ysb.ca and search Youth Cabinet for more information.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mayeen, and I'm delighted to be your other co-host today. I'm also a member of the YSB's Foundation's Youth Cabinet, and I've enjoyed my involvement this year, despite it being a very different and difficult year. Our monthly meetings have given me something to look forward to and a way to focus on helping others. On behalf of today's speakers from YSB, we wanted to thank you for giving us this opportunity to support other youth, our participants in today's session, and to support the young people in your lives. Today's event, in fact, the entire series of YSB's Your Mind Matters event this year is sponsored by Bell Let's Talk. Thanks to the awareness created by Bell Let's Talk, I can honestly say that it's changed the way we talk about mental wellness. I know that within my friend group, it's really helped us start the conversation and keep it going. On behalf of myself and others and all of YSB, thank you to Bell, the Bell Let's Talk movement, and Sandy McDonald, who is the Regional Director of Community Affairs. We all know that it's been quite a challenging year, and we're all aware of how we're feeling most days, and we're working through a lot with this pandemic and lockdown. One thing that we really want to make sure everyone takes away from today's session is that it's a sign of strength to reach out for help, never weakness. Those words remind us that we all need support at times. So let's get started with today's event. Joining us today will be Hanan Ghazal. Hanan is a youth worker at YSB who works with YSB's Ethnocultural Youth Advisory Committee, among others. Also joining Hanan is Judy Anita Joseph, a member of the Ethnocultural Youth Advisory Committee. We're also going to hear from Almarine Thomas, who is the clinical coordinator of the Bridges program, part of YSB's mental health services. Closing out our event, we'll also hear from another member of Youth Cabinet, Anaya Siraj. Anaya is going to share her love for music with a piece she chose specifically for today, and also tell us about an exciting program that she started to help support BIPOC children in Ottawa.
Before we dive into the conversation, I want to share that we will be using a few of the following terms. The first is the acronym BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. You will also hear the word racialized. As a group, we have decided to use both terms interchangeably. From one person to another, I'm excited to hear from Judy and Nada Joseph. Perhaps you could share with us your perspective on the specific needs of racialized youth when it comes to issues affecting their mental wellness.
Thank you, Raisa, and hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you. And before sharing my thoughts, I'd like to to tell you a short story about myself. I remember back in 2018, when I first arrived here in Canada, I had that class that I was always trying to avoid because I always felt depressed and rejected, neglected when I was there. You must be asking yourself why neglected, why rejected in a class in high school? Well, it wasn't because of the students, but it was because of the teacher. And I always felt that I was ignored. The first 2 days, whenever she would ask a question, I would raise my hand, she would ignore me. I thought maybe it's because she doesn't see me, I'll move closer. But the same thing keeps repeated itself. And I was like, oh, maybe it's something related to my color because I was the only Black person in this room. And I wanted to share that experience with someone at school. But when I was looking for a counselor, I couldn't find someone who looked like me. The reason why I'm sharing this experience with you today is because I've been talking to different racialized youth, and the same story keeps repeating itself in different ways, which brings me to two things that I think will be great, will be very helpful when it comes to mental health within the BIPOC community. The first thing is self-esteem. A low self-esteem is a silent killer. So us, the BIPOC youth, we need more than ever to improve our self-esteem. It can be hard to do it ourselves. That's why we always need other people helps, our community help, and knowing and learning to value ourselves, knowing and learning to love ourselves as we are. And the second thing is inclusion. Us youth, we spend most of our time at school, and it can be very challenging for us when facing a situation and wanting to share that to someone, and we're looking around and we can't even find someone who looks like us. It can be very frustrated for us. So that's why it's always, from according to me, it will be preferable, it will be perfect if in our schools we could have a figure who can represent ourselves. So in a word, that's the two things that, according to me, the two specific things that I think might have a huge impact in our mental health: self-esteem and inclusion. Thank you.
I think a lot of us can resonate with that. And as a person with, as a BIPOC person, I think I could totally understand that, being that it's pretty much common towards across all BIPOC persons. And thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Julia. So next, we are welcoming Hanan. So Hanan is a recent graduate from the University of Ottawa with a double major in psychology and linguistics, and with a passion for mental health and working with youth. Hanan is a youth worker with YSB who works with the YSB's youth engagement groups, which includes BIPOC youth, offering them pathways to mental health services. Hanan, you understand firsthand the importance of youth, of having access to mental health resources and the appropriate supports to ensure that they are taking care of their mental well-being. So, can you first tell us a little bit about the youth you work with within the YSB's youth advisory committees, and what do you do in your role?
Thank you, Raisa. So yeah, at YSB, my role is to work with the Ethnocultural program. Through this role, I'm working with youth advisory committees such as the Ethnocultural Youth Advisory Committee, EAC for short, the West End Youth Motivators, UIM for short, and West End Intersectional Leaders, WIL for short. Those two can get a little confusing sometimes. So at EAC, the committee aims to engage young racialized people and allies in learning how to be more culturally sensitive. Workshops have been done in the context of mental health, youth programming, and student associations in the University of Ottawa. The committee has also hosted things like paint nights, cooking classes, and other types of workshops, such as employment workshops, to encourage youth to build that self-esteem, like Judy said, and encourage them to build friendships with other racialized folks and their allies. We have a Facebook page where we post all our events. You can visit us on Facebook. Our handle is EYAC, so EYAC, and then Ottawa, but with a capital O. At WYM, the committee is dedicated to positively engaging their peers, families, and community. The committee aims to offer positive role modeling for at-risk young people in marginalized communities. So in the West End, the committee also hosts an annual event amongst other workshops and trainings. But this event, I want to highlight it because it really is their pride and joy. And it's called Balling for Our Brothers Tournament. So during this tournament is where they engage community in basketball, which is a community-wide loved like activity, and also have a discussion on how we can support youth in the West End. You can check out all of WYM's activities on Instagram. Their handle is WYM Ottawa, no capital. And then lastly at WIL, a fairly new committee, they aim to engage young women in positive recreational activity and identity formation. They started an Instagram page. Mind you, this committee started just as COVID hit. So it's been a little hard really establishing ourselves, but we are trying. And they're doing a wonderful job. So they started an Instagram page to continue reaching out to young women, and there they post, like personal affirmations about self-love and self-confidence, but also things like hair masks and face masks to support young women um, looking for these kind of resources. You can check us out on Instagram. Our handle is WIL_Ottawa. I told you it gets a little confusing sometimes. So yeah, please check out what these groups are doing and follow and join the conversation with us. Thank you.
That honestly sounds amazing. Super cool. And thanks for sharing. And it's really great to see your passion. So next up, we're going to hear from Almarine Thomas. Almarine is the clinical coordinator of Bridges, which is a mental health program at YSB. Bridges works with youth who have complex mental health needs. So yeah, Almarine, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and the youth you work with?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Almarine. I've been at YSB now for 18 years. So for 17 years, I was a frontline staff in mental health. So I had the privilege of working with a lot of youth from different cultures and different background. And just to be able to have them share their stories to me has been such a privilege. And so now in my role as a coordinator, I work at the Bridges program with youth 13 to 18 years old. And these are youth who are in Ottawa, but also on the outskirts of Ottawa, Prescott Russell, Lanark County. So it's areas covered by the Champlain LHIN. And Bridges, it's a partnership between the Youth Services Bureau, the Royal Ottawa Hospital, CHEO, and the Ottawa Public Health. And the program came about because we noticed that there were a lot of youth who were in inpatient and they were being discharged and they needed that continuation of support that was not in the community. Or there were also youth who were in and out of the hospital, and being in the hospital really was not meeting the need. And so this service, the hope was to be able to have an intensive short-term service in the community where clients can go to get psychiatry support, counseling, group, psychology, assessment, all these different multidisciplinary support, just to be able to navigate those systemic barriers or mental health. And so it has been a pleasure to work with my team, with youth who are struggling with depression, psychosis, suicide, you name it. And so to access the service, clients do have to be referred. They have to be referred either by YSB or the hospital. So in a nutshell, that's what the program's about.
That honestly sounds like a super cool program.
It is.
Yeah. So I know that I hear a lot about mental health and mental illness, and I know they're not the same. So could you help me understand a little bit about the difference between the two terms?
So mental health is something that everyone has. It really relates to the state or the state of our mind or mental well-being. It's about how are we doing emotionally, socially, psychologically. Our mental health affects how we navigate society, how we navigate systemic barriers, how we navigate our relationships, how we problem solve, how we make decisions. So the healthier our mental health is, our functioning at our best would be amplified. When it comes to mental illness refers to different mental disorders that affect the way the person thinks, the way they act, the way they feel. It does not discriminate at all. I know that in a lot of community, especially a lot of racialized community, there's this idea that mental illness does not exist. And from my experience and from research, mental illness touches everyone, regardless of age, your religion, your race, your ethnicity, your gender. And so I'm hoping that will normalize this idea that mental illness and the stigma associated with it is not something to be ashamed of. It, to me, is an indication of that the person may not be functioning at their best. And what is it that we need to do as a community to able to help that person to function at their best? Because having depression, still dealing with a trauma or dealing with a violence, having those diagnoses or those disorder does not mean that you cannot have a healthy mental health. So having a mental illness does not remove you from having a healthy mental health. And so I'd like that stigma to be dismissed as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you so much. That really does clarify my understanding. And yeah, hopefully that does remove the stigma. So I'm glad you mentioned a little bit about mental health within racialized youth. So in all of your guys' experience, what are some particular barriers that they talk about or experience when they're trying to reach out for help with their mental health?
Is that a question to me or to everyone?
To everyone, I guess anybody can go ahead.
I will start first. I think one of the most thing that we're afraid of is the fact that we will not be taken too seriously by others. Often, if within the racialized community, as Almarine said, they have this myth, this stigma that mental health doesn't exist. You mental illness doesn't exist. So if you're talking about that, they will say, oh, do you know what you're talking about? Or maybe they will tell you to pray, or they will tell you, oh, you're young. If we're staying within the youth community, they will say, oh, you're too young to be depressed. You don't have this, I have this much to do, and then you just have school. So it's the fact that most of the time we're afraid that we're not taking too seriously. So we're staying in our comfort zone and we're not sharing our experiences.
Those are some of the same stories I've heard from the young people that I've worked with over the years, is this idea that their voice, I think over time they feel as if they become voiceless, where which in itself can really lead to that isolation and this sense of shame and blame. And I know Judy, you talked about self-esteem before. So this idea that something is wrong with you, that you're not strong enough, that you're weak. And those are some of the stories that I heard from the youth over the years. And sometimes even coming to see me in secrecy because they're worried that they're going to be judged or that they're going to lose their friends or that their family will be upset with them. And so there's this secrecy I find, especially in the racialized community around mental health and even just seeking support. And so, I'm hoping this conversation will remove that shame that a lot of young people may feel, or this disconnect and them walking alone with these mental health struggles.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like there's this the idea that like maybe their parents will understand, and then this whole idea of secrecy. I think Hanan, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to add value, there's a whole other piece too that I've seen, much to what Almarine is saying, where children just, or like young people don't want to let their parents down almost. Like it's like, oh, I'm not strong enough to deal with this, and this. And for that reason, I'm letting my parents down or letting my family down. And so like this pressure or this expectation continues to build, which doesn't end up being supportive for them like at all, and increases their their mental health struggles. So it's really important for also for young people not to put that, like, I want to say, paralyzing pressure on themselves, and to reach out when they need to, because it is important to receive services. There was something that I was taught, and sorry, I'm just gonna quickly say it, but basically it's this like it's called a bucket metaphor, and it's saying that, you know, you have, ideally you would have a full bucket of water, and then when people need support you can provide them with like little bits of water. But if your bucket is empty, then you can't really provide anyone anything, right? And you can't provide any for yourself either. So this idea of reaching out and getting services or support to keep your bucket full, so that you can provide support to other people. Yeah.
I think there is also another layer to it, to the problem with the barriers, because there's so many social determinants of health that affects, these barriers and how these racialized youth are going to access support, with the whole poverty, housing issues that can all affect mental health. And, with the whole reaching out for help, if those issues are not solved first, you can't really solve their mental health issues. And I know Hanan touched a little bit about this, but Julia, why do you think that young people often feel uncomfortable talking with their families about mental health?
As I said previously, the main thing is recently I've talked to many different young people, either white people, white youth, or racialized youth, and I've talked about mental health, and the same response. They had the same answer, and that's what I said previously. They're afraid of not being taken seriously, and they're afraid that their parents will ignore them with what they shared with them.
Yeah, and I can see why that is a problem and how that can really contribute to a person's struggle. And I guess, you know, Almarine, if I was that young person struggling, where would you suggest I go for help?
And that itself is a big question. Because, at YSB, we do have mental health services. We do have the ethnocultural support and community program that Anand spoke about. There are addiction services around the community. There are services that provide support around trauma, acculturation issue. There are those services in the community. However, the issue is about access, I find, and a lack of awareness of what those services are. And so I can give a list of different services, but if the youth, they're not aware of these services, then it's going to be hard for them to access them. I want to follow up on something that Judia says when it comes around services that are inclusive. I think a big part of youth who are struggling for help is for them to feel that there are actually people in their community who are willing to hear them and listen to them first, right? Having services in community doesn't mean that the youth is going to feel connected to that service. If those service providers don't reflect some of their values, don't look like them, if the perception is there that you won't know me, you don't know me, you do not practice similar beliefs, then those, to me, regardless if they exist in the community, they're no use to that youth. So for me, the first thing is make services accessible to youth, and they need to reflect the need of our community and the need of the youth. When I think that is put in place, then youth will be able to realize there are services like YSB, that they do have mental health services. We do have different levels of counseling. We have a crisis line. There are community resource centers. They do have a lot of services geared towards youth and acculturation. There are youth services around addiction services. And so I would say, if ever in doubt, a good place to begin would be to contact the YSB main number for the mental health, or even just to contact community services where Anan support. And I think those would be great place for them to start, to be able to feel connected and be connected based on where they're at and where their needs are. So the big thing for me is to be accessible and to be willing to listen to what the youth say that they need.
Yeah, certainly. And I think a lot of us within the BIPOC community kind of struggle to find that, practitioner who truly understands what we're going through and kind of the background that we have went through, immigrating to Canada, for example. And sometimes when I talk to friends, they say that they're not sure that they're sad enough or that their problems are extreme enough to be, like good,
Mm-hmm.
so to say, right? And for them to reach out like a crisis line. And
Yeah.
sometimes older family members may say that, they live in a privileged society, that the issues that the youth are experiencing is invalid. So when do you think should a young person reach out to a mental health line?
I would say anytime. Anytime there is a need. They don't have to wait until they think they have a mental illness. It could be, for instance, they have an exam that's coming up the next day. They're overly stressed out and they just need someone to help them feel grounded and centered and feel reassured. That's a crisis. So for me, crisis is individualized, is subjective, meaning that you put your own definition to what a crisis is. It could be someone who's suicidal. It could be a parent. Even the parents can call. It's whenever there is a need. So I always use the word crisis in quote to say you define it. If there's a need for help, then reach out for that help. This idea that you're not sad enough, I think that comes from the bigger systemic picture and having all these different levels of what is serious from what is not serious. And so I would encourage you to not get caught up in what other people believe is serious versus not serious. If they feel that they need some support, it could be one time for 5 seconds. As long as they define that I need help to figure this out or to deal with this, then to me, call the crisis number.
And I think another follow-up question or something that a lot of people think about, it's just, what would you say to a family member who worries that calling the crisis line could mean that authorities are involved?
Mm-hmm. So the one thing, and I can only really speak about YSB crisis line, but for our crisis service, someone can call anonymously. You don't have to give your name, right? A benefit in giving your name, especially if you're involved with other services, is that your worker will know when you do call, because we do share that one system. However, on a crisis call, you can remain anonymous. So it could be over the call, and it could be also have chat support as well. You don't have to identify yourself. So there is that element of privacy and security. If you do give your name, for instance, and we are concerned that there is a risk to your safety, we will try to support you, to encourage you. Either we can send someone, either do we need to call the police to come and support you, or do we need to help you connect to a parent or to a friend or a trusted loved one or peer to kind of walk that out with you? Because what we don't want is for you to go through that alone. And when we end the call, we want to make sure that you still have someone in your circle, hopefully, that could be another lifeline for you, right? So those are some of the things that we talk to the youth and try to help them figure out. But we never impose our ideas on them at all. We always respect what they need.
Yeah, and I think it's really like a lot of people are really are very happy, I guess, with the whole anonymous thing, because it doesn't have as much pressure as like maybe stating your name and all that, and that really relieves some stress just going to that crisis line. So a little bit different topic, but I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I also know that, when I'm talking with friends, we're always talking about, like, if we wanted to reach out, we really want someone that understands us and knows what we've gone through. And this type of understanding isn't something that necessarily comes from like just learning. So what are some ways that a mental health service provider needs to understand or try to do to kind of bridge this gap and make this happen?
I think one of the big thing is a couple things. So first, one of the things for me is for that worker to understand and be honest with themselves around what are their biases, right? As a therapist, what are your values around helping clients? What are your values around helping racialized youth? Are you humble enough to admit to this youth that, you know what, I'm here to listen to you. I want to support you. I don't know a lot about your culture. I don't know, but I'm willing to learn, right? So it's to give that stance of being honest about who you are, what your experiences are, and to want to create that alliance, that partnership to say, yes, I have that hat as a therapist, but you know what, you're the expert and I'm here to help you understand and see that you're the expert. So let's do this together. I think that is so key. I think a big part as well is to help the youth to understand that in your session, their voice matters. And I hear that from a lot of you saying, because I'm this age, because I'm a teenager, people don't take me seriously. People don't listen to me. And I think it's really important for us to promote that regardless of who you are, what your background is, your voice, it matters in this session. And your voice matters more than to me than whatever paperwork that came with me seeing you. Right? I think it's important as well for the workers to understand that whatever information that they gathered in the referral, use it as information. Don't use it to define who the young person is in front of you. So for me, really a part of it is a big part of helping the youth. There's a mental health aspect, but the relational piece is really, really big. It's about respecting who they are, respecting what they want, be honest about how you can support them and let them know you're not their parent, you're not their boss, you're not there to tell them what to do. You're help them to understand and figure out what is the best thing for them in this moment. And I think, another big piece would be to understand what are the systemic barriers for racialized youth in our society, not just in the city, in the country, but even within your family as well, right? And I think as a worker, you cannot ignore that for racialized youth, there are a lot of systemic barriers that do reinforce and that do play a role in their mental health and how they're functioning in society.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And there's so much that I think can be done as well. Some of the things that you talked about were honestly really great. So Hanan or Judia, if you have any other comments, I guess, on that idea, like what should a mental health service provider need to understand about racialized youth kind of to bridge this gap?
Yeah, so essentially everything Almarine said, I think hits the nail on the head. The only thing I would add is to have that sense of empathy as a mental health practitioner. Sorry. As a mental health practitioner, to have that sense of empathy. And I think when you're empathetic towards the young person and you acknowledge, the barriers that they're facing, and the strength that it took to reach out for support, that encourages that therapeutic alliance that Almarine was talking about, and really helps build that sense of trust and bond the therapist or the mental health practitioner with the young person. I remember as a young person, when I was reaching out for support, I just wanted someone to acknowledge that even being there was tremendous. due to all the barriers that I was facing at that time. So just having that, and then having that being acknowledged in a genuine way, just makes you feel more safe, I think, and encourages you to continue like getting services or getting support.
I agree with everything being said. And I think that Almarine said it previously. Me personally, I'm not a health practitioner, mental health practitioner, or anything like this, but I'm a youth. And I know what I like from someone who said that they want to help me. So personally, I would always want, and I know that among us, among youth like me, I know that we want someone to listen to us, not someone who will judge us. We don't want to have a judge, someone who will judge us, but someone who can be here and listen to what we're saying, and then to take that seriously, and to try not to oppose to I'm trying to find the right words, but I think I'll stick to the first two things that I said: listen and not judging us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, what it really, the bottom line is having that empathy to try to understand where they're coming from and not come from a place, from bias. And I think also some families think that in addition to the stigma that talking about mental health, there's a possibility that, going to therapy or seeking support can change you, and the fear of, that the values that you've learned are going to change. And the next, we're going to be welcoming another member of our youth cabinet, Anaya. So, Anaya is a community minded youth champion who wants to share her passion for music with children and youth who may not have access to piano classes. So, welcome, Anaya.
Thank you, Raisa. So good afternoon, everyone. I guess it is afternoon. My name is Anaya, and I'm a YSB Youth Cabinet member. At the beginning of this year, while we were in lockdown, I was reflecting on what I could personally do to make a difference in the lives of children and youth in Canada. The past year was filled with weighty events such as the ongoing pandemic, racial inequality protests, and of course, the infamous murder hornets, to name a few. After doing a considerable amount of research and contemplation, I decided that establishing a piano program for underprivileged BIPOC children and youth would be something where I could use my current skill set in music for the greater good. Growing up, I found that the transformative power a structural musical education provided developed grit, discipline, and fortitude in me. Having witnessed these benefits firsthand, I strongly believe that this program can build transferable life skills in those who need them the most but may not necessarily have access to it. My hope is that an education in music will help disadvantaged BIPOC youth cultivate the tools that they need to become upstanding citizens of today's society. Did you know that making music, rather than just listening to it, has been proven to have remarkable effects on mental health and the brain's ability to change and develop? The Australia and New Zealand Mental Health Association has found that regularly playing an instrument, as opposed to just listening to music, reduces symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. And bonus, it also increases feelings of relaxation and contentment. But this is what's really cool. Harvard Medical School and the University of Pennsylvania have done studies which conclude that playing the piano, or any other instrument for that matter, doesn't just lift your spirits. It also benefits your memory, overall cognitive function, and your cardiovascular system. Learning to play an instrument entails regular practicing, so you'll be busy, which is good, because science also shows that people who are kept busy are actually happier. Plus, you will probably be practicing indoors, because pianos usually stay indoors, so you'll be safe from the murder hornets, which is another plus. You can sign up as a student or volunteer at the 88keysfoundation.wixsite.canada.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anaya. That sounds like a really, really cool program that you've started up there. And I just wanted to end off kind of by saying, like, we can easily feel judgment from family, friends, or colleagues when we or our families are going through a difficult time. So we all have to choose where to focus our energy and attention. And for me, I'd rather focus it on my friends and family and those who are supporting me. I hope that this session here has increased the dialogue around mental health and is helping to change and destigmatize mental health. And this has been such an important conversation, and I'm really glad that as a young person that we have such caring YSB staff who are here to listen and help. If you want to know more about how to access support, you'll find details about all of YSB's work at ysb.ca. And I just wanted to say thank you again to Almarine, Hanan, Judia, and Inaya. And of course, a huge thank you to our sponsor, Bell Let's Talk and Sandy McDonald. And without your support, this wouldn't have been possible. We'll now close with a gift of music. Anaya is going to play the piano for us. Over to you, Anaya.
Thanks.
absolutely amazing and wonderful. So thank you so much, Anaya. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.